Welcome to The Power and the Pain, where your past isn't your prison.
It's the fuel for your purpose.
I'm Greg Pease, combat veteran, NLP trainer, and your guide to turn trauma into triumph. This is The Power and the Pain. Let's go. Meta programs. That's a bit of a sentence there. If you've never heard of them before, you might be wondering, what are meta programs? And real simply put, meta programs are our conditioned behaviors. So how we choose to act or react in any given situation, environment, circumstance. This is our meta program. So the more you can understand about meta programs, these are also referred to as our personality types. The more you understand about meta programs, the more you can, one, better understand yourself and what best suits you. About 10 years ago, I heard the quote from Robert Kiyosaki, and I absolutely loved it. Work your strengths, hire your weaknesses. And I absolutely love that. And if you are going to employ that in your life, then you have to know what your strengths and what your weaknesses are. Furthermore, I've shared on an episode somewhere on here, I had a boss one time when I was interviewing for a position ask me what was my greatest weakness. And I really struggled to come up with an answer on that. And I was like, I was really headstrong in that chapter in my life, thinking like, I'm attacking all my weaknesses. I don't have any weaknesses. And I realized how quickly we are fooling ourselves if we're not aware of where our opportunities or weaknesses are. One, so that we can get stronger. Two, so that we can properly delegate in our life and in our business. So let's dive in a little bit more and get deeper into meta programs. Now, meta programs are different than our values. You see, our values are what's important about what happens to us, what we're willing to accept and tolerate. That has to do with our values, whereas most people, myself included, I used to believe that our values were how we behaved. But that's our meta programs. That's our personality. That's our character, how we behave to others and outwardly. What's important to us and what we're willing to accept from others outwardly coming in, that's our values. All right, today we're talking about that character, personality, and meta programs. While we do have there's a whole list of meta programs, if you will. There's 4 simple meta programs, and then there's over 20 complex meta programs that we run. And for people that are interested in getting into deep behavioral profiling or psychology, learning all of the complex meta programs is a great asset in knowledge for where you're taking your passion. But for those that are just looking to learn a little bit more about themselves and others around them, for those that lead a household, for those that lead a business, you want to make sure you know what your people's strengths and opportunities are, and make sure you put everyone on the right seat on the bus. Just because someone's not performing in one position doesn't mean that that person is not valuable to the team as a whole. It might just be that person needing to be positioned somewhere else on the bus, somewhere that's going to make them a bigger asset for you. So 4 simple meta programs. Let's dive into what they are. Most of us have probably heard of a Myers-Briggs test before. And in the Myers-Briggs test, we end up with 4 letters like INFJ, ENTP, or something of that nature. And that test is actually eliciting your 4 meta programs. Now, once you understand what these meta programs are, you can actually just evaluate yourself and determine which of these programs am I running? And then what does that mean in terms of strengths and opportunities? So today I'm going to really dive in to explain what these 4 meta programs are and how they exist in our life. And then we're going to come back for a part 2, and I'm going to express in detail. I'm going to make it very clear for you what each one of these meta programs are and what they look like inside of behaviors, so that you can identify very clearly which one you are eliciting or demonstrating or utilizing in your life, and know that you can always change your meta programs. Who you are is nothing more than a compilation of who you've been up until now. And you haven't been aware of these meta programs up until now. So moving forward, you can begin to consciously choose the meta programs that best fit you. All right. The 4 meta programs that the Myers-Briggs test is eliciting is whether a person is introverted or extroverted, whether a person is a sensor or intuitor, whether a person is a thinker or a feeler, and whether a person is a perceiver or a judger. Again, I'm going to go into a part 2 very next episode where I'm going to take a deep dive into each of these 4 meta programs. Now, we call them 4 meta programs. So introvert, extrovert, we call that a program. But inside of that program, we have 2 different behaviors displayed inside of that program. So of the 4 programs that are being elicited in a Myers-Briggs, we actually have 8 different meta programs inside of there. And inside of the 8 options, so is a person introvert, extrovert, are they a sensor, intuitor, are they a thinker, feeler, or perceiver, or a judger? The potential combinations, so are they an introvert sensor or introvert intuitor, whichever one they are of that. Let's say they're an introverted intuitor. Now, are they an introverted intuitor that is a thinker or a feeler, whichever one they are of that? Then are they an introverted intuitor that is a thinker? And then are they a perceiver or a judger? And let's suppose they're also a perceiver at the end. So there's a potential of 16 combinations when taking the Myers-Briggs test. Now, this is pretty cool if you think about it, because we're taking 8.2 billion people on this planet, and we're reducing them all the way down to one of 16 possible personality types. That's pretty powerful when you consider learning the meta programs and really digesting and integrating and understanding the information allows you to see every single person in only a potential of 16 different groups. You could say that you're only ever going to meet 16 different people ever again in your life. Now, we all know that everyone is a little bit unique. So then, is it fair to say that it's only 16 people? No. Well, yes and no. Yes, at a high level. So at a high level, we can make general statements about these 16 personality types, and we're going to be really close to the general actions that that person displays in the future or currently displays right now. So when we look at these 16, we have a really good general idea of how this person forms decisions and how this person behaves, or how I form decisions and how I behave. And if I were to get really inside of projections for any one of these 16 groups, all of a sudden there's a lot more opportunity for me to be off in the projection or judgment that I'm making for any one of these groups. So in abstract and in broad statements, we can absolutely start creating an algorithm and quantifying behavior in which all humans will operate inside of one of these 16 personality types. All humans will operate inside of one of these 16 personality types. If we want to start knowing more finite detail about that person inside of that archetype, if you will, or that personality type, this is where we have to start looking at things a little less digital or black and white in nature. And we have to start looking at things a little bit more analogically and with a whole lot more gray. When we do that, then we can start taking an even deeper dive into each one of these 16 personality types and start learning very specific projections for the individual operating in whichever of the 16 personality types. Here's what I mean. When we think about a person being introverted or a person being extroverted, well, in NLP, I frequently say, and NLP says, we have to separate the person from the behavior. So we have to see these as two separate entities. There's the person over here and who they are as a person, which is really much more about their values. And then here is the behavior they are displaying. So when we allow ourselves to quantify in this nature and we separate person from behavior, the person displaying the behavior is responsible for the behavior. So they are accountable and responsible for the behavior. If there is a consequence or a reaction to that behavior, the person that displayed the behavior or chose the behavior is responsible for that reaction or consequence. Okay, so separating the person from the behavior does not negate the person's responsibility for the behavior. And remember, this person is responsible for what? For the behavior that they displayed. See, a decision was made and then an action was taken. But the person is the person with or without the behavior. Like, they still exist as who they are as an individual with or without the behavior. Every time they make a new decision and display a new behavior, they become more responsible for the behavior that they displayed. If we're willing to look at it in this nature, and sometimes it can be hard to digest, usually this is if we were probably reserving a behavior that someone did to us that we internally feel like if we separate them from their behavior, that allows them some type of free pass because it wasn't them. They chose it. They're responsible for the behavior. To say it wasn't them, the decision was made by them. The behavior was displayed by them. So they're responsible for the behavior. And I just want to create awareness that they're more than the behavior. The behavior is just one little part in a decision that they displayed. They're more than that. So if you drove to work today and you are a counselor, you displayed the behavior of driving on the way to work. You're so much more than a driver. In fact, at work, you're not a driver at all. You're a counselor. So the behavior that you decided on, because you made a decision on how you were getting work today, the behavior you decided was, I'm going to drive to work. You were responsible for ensuring that you got there when you drove. You were responsible for all the laws, making sure you abided them on the way there. You were responsible for making sure that you were safe and drove safely on the way there. You're so much more than a driver. This was a decision and a behavior that you displayed in a period of time during your life. You're responsible for that behavior, but you're so much more. And when I separate you from your behavior, while you were driving to work is what you were doing. You, the essence, the person, was still sitting right there in the vehicle. You decided to display that behavior. When we look at separating a person from the behavior, and if we remain rigid in saying that they are their behavior, if we remain rigid in that, this is to maintain that digital thinking or that black and white thinking. So it's all in or all out. It's all or nothing. So if they do this thing, that must be who they are. And we're making that all of them. They are this. Well, some part of them made the decision to do that. They are who they are, even outside of the behavior, while being responsible for it. If we were to maintain that kind of digital thinking, all in, all or nothing, all in, all out, black or white, then we would look at these metaprogram or personality types as I am an introvert, or I am an extrovert, or he or she is an introvert, or he or she is an extrovert. And it would be creating this all in, all or nothing, black or white mentality, which I'm going to suggest is a bit rigid and limiting in nature. So if you were to determine that a person is extrovert, they are extrovert, or I am an extrovert, then we're creating the illusion for ourselves at an unconscious level that I am all extrovert, or that person is all extrovert, when in actuality they are displaying the behavior or choosing the behavior of an extrovert. And when we allow ourselves to start looking more analogical, think of it like digital thinking, like a light switch. The lights are on or the lights are off. That's it. It's just up or down, and it's on or it's off. There's not a point in time when we're turning this switch when the lights are kind of on or kind of off. In a flash, it either is or it isn't. This is that digital thinking, black and white. They are or they are not. Whereas when we think of a more analogical thinking, we're thinking of like a dimmer switch. So I can turn this light all the way up as bright as it will go, or I can turn this light all the way down so dim that we barely can see any light coming from the filament at all. However, the light would technically still be on. And then I could turn the light off completely if I want it. This would be more analogically thinking, a lot more gray space in between. So if we had a dimmer switch and someone asked, are the lights on? So as long as the lights were on, the answer would be yes. However, are the lights all the way up, all the way down, or exactly where at in between? Is that person all the way extrovert or all the way introvert, or exactly where in between? This is where things start to get a little bit more complex, if you will. You see, when we took 8.2 billion people and quantified them into just 16 groups, some of you, I hope, were thinking, isn't that a bit oversimplified, Greg? To just say that there's 16 people, 16 different types of people out there, and that's it. Well, yes and no, as we said earlier. There is, at a high level, all 8.2 billion fit into one of these 16 categories at a high level. And then if we start picking each person apart at a more granular level, a more detailed level, then we start seeing there's a lot of actual fine-tuned variation inside of these 16 different personality types. Imagine each program that's being elicited inside of the Myers-Briggs. So of the 4 simple meta programs, the first one being introvert, extrovert. Imagine instead of seeing this like a switch that is introvert or extrovert, instead of seeing it like that, imagine it was a spectrum, if you would. And all the way over here is extrovert. And if someone was all the way over here, they would be 100% extrovert. And over here is introvert. And if someone was all the way over here, they would be 100% introvert. Okay? Now, if we split this line in half, imagine that in the middle, a person was 50% introvert and 50% extrovert. So as I go, I'm 100% extrovert, 99%, 98, all the way down to 50% extrovert. At which point in time I become 49% extrovert, I actually became 51% introvert. And to understand this, we really have to start quantifying and understanding the law of polarity, or the law of duality, in which two things that appear to be different are really a continuation with varying degrees in one of the same. Kind of like happy and sad, hot and cold, and day and night. At which point in time did we absolutely leave day and go into night? And at which point in time did we absolutely know what was hot or absolutely know what was cold? Instead, if we considered hot and cold, and if we said all the way up here is the hottest thing in the universe, the temperature is the hottest thing in the universe, and over here is the coldest thing that we know in the universe. If something was all the way over here in this temperature, if it went 1 degree lower, 1 single degree lower, it has already became colder. The hottest thing in the universe, 1 degree lower, it has already become colder. It's not cold yet. It's varying degrees. See, the law of polarity, the law of duality is when two things appear to be opposites, but they're really just varying degrees of one and the same thing. So now that we can see this in a lot more analogical thinking, a lot more gray area, then we start realizing they are not extrovert, or I am not introvert. However, 55% of the time, I utilize the behavior programming of an introvert. Now, if I was 55% introvert, that would greatly allow me a ton of access operating as an extrovert. Although, if I had my way and my choices, I would 5% favor being and displaying the behavior of an introvert. If I was 60% introvert and 40% extrovert, clearly most of the time I'll do extrovert or introvert, and some of the time we'll see me do extrovert. If I was 70-30 or 80-20, we would predominantly see me operate as an introvert, but there would be some occasions in which I was capable of operating in an extroverted manner. We know, like, think about the person that you know that's like very introverted, but they're like a good on the guitar, good on the drums or something. And when it's an opportunity for them to play, they just like pop out and you're like, who is that? That's probably more like an 80-20. 80% of the time, they are going to decide to use the behavior program of introvert. But 20% of the time, they're completely going to flip and decide to use the behavioral programming of extrovert. Could be 90-10. It is very unlikely that it is 100% and zero. I'm not quite aware of that being so. I guess anything could be possible. But it could be as far as 90-10. And if someone is 90% introverted or 90% extroverted, well, it's going to be really easy for me to gamble on the behavior they will choose to display. However, even if they're 90-10, I have to be wrong 10% of the time. Because even if they're 90% extrovert, they will still do introvert 10% of the time. This is where we start creating a little bit more complexity in what we thought was an oversimplified 16 group in which we boiled down 8.2 billion people. So now we start looking at what percentage of the time do I, if I'm evaluating self, I would start there first. Or if I'm evaluating others, my household, my team, business, clients. If I'm evaluating others, what percentage of the time does this person choose? Whether they're choosing consciously or unconsciously. Most of the time, it'll be unconscious. Whether they're choosing unconsciously or consciously, what percentage of the time do they choose to be extrovert? Or do I choose to be extrovert? And what percentage of the time do I choose to be introvert? This allows me to start noticing in a lot more detail inside of these 16 different program types. So if they're just 51% extrovert, then when that person takes a Myers-Briggs type test, they're going to show up as an extrovert. And if I group them in all things that I know about extroverts, by the way, next episode, I'm going over these 4 simple meta programs in detail so you understand what that means and what those behaviors look like. Make sure you catch next week's. If I know that a person is 51% extrovert, however, if I group them in all things that I know about extroverts, I'm going to end up being wrong close to 50% of the time with this person. I'm going to end up being wrong close to 50% of the time, because if they're only 51% extrovert, that means it's like luck of the draw if they actually do extrovert this time. Now, is it likely someone's 51% something? Look, let's not split hairs here, but yes, people are in the 50 percentile of, so someone might be 55 or 58% or whatever that is. Sure, someone probably lands at 51 specifically, somewhere out there, but people definitely are a lot closer to the middle, and some people are on the outsides, okay? If I know that this person is, say, 51, 55% extrovert, that already starts to give me some fine-tuned cueing into how I make considerations and projections for this person's behaviors. I know that if they had their way, they would go the extroverted route. But I know based on other factors, it is very easily possible and even likely that they'll go the introverted route. So this starts changing things a little bit, again, allowing for that gray area to go inside. Here's what's more. If I know a person is, say, I'm going to say 75% or less, 75% or less. So between 51 and 74%. If a person is between 51 and 74, and the statement I'm about to make is stronger on the 50 side, weaker on the 74 side, okay? If a person is between 51 and 74% of any program, that cues me in already that they have flexibility in their behavior. So less so on the 74% side, way more so on the 51% side. So if they're 51, 55, 60, 65, 70%, this tells me they have a decent range of flexibility. They're willing to do the other one. This one just is favorable to them. This one they get the most results out of, but they have flexibility and capability. And if they're somewhere in like the 50s, 60s, they even have confidence in the other side. Let's look at the pros and the cons here. The pro, the way I see it, the benefit to someone being more in the middle of this spectrum, if you will, either side, doesn't matter. Either side. The benefit to being more in the middle, let's say 65 from 50 to 65. So either side, extrovert, introvert. If you're under 65% of extrovert or introvert and over 50, so 51 to 65, this is going to give you an extreme range of flexibility in your behavior. And the more flexibility you have in your behavior, some people they're like, well, I'm not sure. Sometimes I do introvert and sometimes I do extrovert. I'm not sure which one I am. If that's you right now, you're like, all right. Now this is the chapter for me. I'll listen up. Hey, I got something for you. So listen up. If you are more, if you're like, man, I don't know. It's kind of 6 and 1, half dozen the other. I might go this way, that way. 6, 7, right? Xander would laugh at that one. Okay. So if you're like, man, I could go this way or I could go that way. If you're thinking that and you're really wondering, you're like, which one am I? This tells you that you have a lot of flexibility in your behavior. This is a huge asset for you because you don't have to do anything. So you can evaluate the situation and you can say, it makes more sense for me to take charge, for me to lead this encounter, for me to control this encounter, for me to be an extrovert. Or you have the range of flexibility to say, hey, I'm going to submit to this. I'm going to take the situation in. I'm going to learn. I'm going to allow this to unfold the way it needs to unfold. You have that flexibility, and that allows you to really have control of your experience. This is the benefit to being closer in the center. Okay, what's the opportunity to being closer in the center? Well, the opportunity, what you're going to face, if you will, if you're anything like me, the opportunity to being in the center is it's hard to know who I am. Think about that just a minute ago. Which one am I? I have this and I do that. I'm not sure. It's hard. It takes us longer. I have a lot of flexibility in my behavioral capabilities. It's harder to learn who you are. It won't stop you. Only you can do that. It just is. I'm just letting you know, like, it is harder to learn who you are. So that journey might be a little bit longer because I might do this and I might do that. So I have to start really quantifying in detail what things what things allow me to want to go this way or have the possibility of this way, and then what things are leading me this way. And there's a lot more of me to quantify. It's a beautiful thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing. If you are in this area, you have a gift, you have an asset, in my opinion. You may have taken that confusion to say, I don't even know who I am. Like, I don't even know what my values are. I don't know what I stand for. You will. You have to continue learning yourself, continue evaluating, continue collecting information about yourself. And if you're leading someone that is very in the middle, you have to really hone in on this person. Okay, and now let's talk about the other side. Let's say you're all the way, you're like greater than 75 on either side. So 75 to 99% of you is either introvert or extrovert. Well, here's the benefit to that. Not only do you know who you are with detail, and are sure of it with clarity and certainty, which allows you to appear confident, but all your people know exactly where you stand and where they stand with you and in relation to every part of that. So this feels good for you. You're able to display confidence, and your people feel real good knowing like that. That's like I know exactly where that person stands, and I know where I stand with them. Because every time it's going to be the same thing. And the opportunity here, if you will, and you guys choose to live your life the way that it benefits you, who am I to say? The opportunity on this outside is it becomes very rigid and limited. Evolution really dies down. See, on one side, who am I and what am I even doing? And I wish I had like something to anchor to. And on the other side, I'm so anchored that evolution is able to pass me by. Because I'm going to stay the same every time because I know who I am. This is just information. You discern what this means for you. In each one of these areas, now you can start looking at and realizing, for one, we're able to group all 8.2 billion people into 16 groups. Holy crap. 2, those 16 groups have a lot of wiggle room inside of them. It's not quite that black and white. You can change. Everyone is capable of change. So if you want more flexibility, you can become more flexible. If you want more rigidity, you can become more rigid. Neither one is right or wrong. And the more you can understand about yourself in relation to these 4 meta programs, the more you're going to be able to lead yourself. And leadership is setting the example. So the more you do this with self, the more you're going to be able to lead others by example. The more you're going to understand these meta programs in others so that you can put them exactly on the right seat on the bus so that they can win utilizing their strengths to benefit the entire team. All right, make sure you stick with us. Come back next week. I'm going to go in detail, introverted, extroverted, intuitor, sensor, thinker, feeler, and perceiver and judger. I'm going to break down each one of these 8 meta programs in extreme detail so that you can start understanding what each of these 16 personality types look like to better understand yourself and to better understand your tribe so you can become a better leader. Make sure you like and subscribe and catch us next week for part 2.
If this hit you deep, trust that.
Your pain has power, and your story isn't over.
Follow, share, and send this to someone who you think might benefit.
I'm Greg, and this was The Power in the Pain. Keep stepping into your power.